Hello everybody, my name is Brianna Bilo, and this is your Spring 2023 Seasonal Climate Summary. So starting off, we'll go over the story of the month from each of the three months of the spring season. So that would be March, April, and May, with Meteorological Spring beginning on March 1st and ending on May 31st. So starting off with March, we had an above normal snowpack. I'm sure everybody is aware of this by now, but at the time it was, deeply impressive. This Utah actually ended up with record-setting snowpack for this season. When these images were grabbed, it was not quite there. It was just approaching record for the whole state, while the state of Colorado was definitely much above normal. The areas east of the divide did not see as snowy of a winter, and so that kind of tempered things down. But the west slope definitely saw a pretty record-setting winter snowpack as things went on. And obviously we had a pretty unrelenting cold and stormy pattern for the first couple of months of 2023. And that, contributed significantly to these increasing snowpacks. And actually this stormy pattern continued well into April before we even started to see anything like a slowdown or the beginning of meltdown. But speaking of April, our story of the month was snowmelt flooding, and this was actually more of a second half of the month issue here, where we started to see some of the lower elevation snowpacks melt out as temperatures began to warm. And yeah, the sunshine and the warmth felt great after continuously cold and stormy 3 months. But it did start to eat it away at that above normal snowpack that we had. And we began to see issues with snowmelt flooding, whether it was in the rivers or just straight up pooling in flat areas such as Hayden, actually. They saw a 40-inch snowpack go down to zero over the course of about 3 days, and they ended up dealing with quite a bit of flooding issues just with ponding from that rapid snowmelt. And it also led to some issues on the airport grounds, where we have one of our automated weather stations that was inaccessible and was not working properly because of some electrical issues due to the flooding. We actually had, I think, about 2 weeks where we couldn't reach that station at all. And we also started to see several reservoirs begin to preemptively do releases in order to accommodate the expected snowmelt that was still in the snowpack up on the mountains. And this included McPhee Reservoir, which basically just opened the gates. They were trying to balance the amount of flow coming in from snowmelt with the amount leaving the reservoir so that they wouldn't end up overcapacity in the dam, which led to about a month's worth of flood warnings on the lower Dolores River up towards the confluence with the Colorado. We started to see issues all across. We had issues with the Yampa River, with the Mancos River, and going into May, we continued to see these issues with different rivers coming in, other rivers dropping off. Right now, I think our biggest issues are with some of the creeks and streams coming down off the mesa. So it's just been, we went from a cold and stormy season right into snowmelt and flooding issues. We've been pretty busy here, but all of this water has been a pretty good thing. So moving into May, finally a story of the month not related to snow or snowmelt flooding. We actually had a severe thunderstorm go right over Rangeley. This was on the afternoon of May 25th. We had several strong, storms popping off over the higher terrain, as you expect this time of the year, although this is really more of a midsummer type pattern in late spring. We saw some small hail. We saw a lot of gusty winds. It was very dry at the surface, and so a lot of the moisture that was held in these storms evaporated before it reached the ground, leading to some very gusty winds. But we ended up keying in on this storm that was approaching Rangeley and going, wow, that looks pretty impressive, and we ended up pulling the trigger on a severe thunderstorm warning, which is only our second of the year. But we actually ended up verifying this when we received several reports, both from phone calls to area businesses and from members of the public, which, I mean, we rely on you guys to give us reports when you see stuff like this, because they help us verify what we're seeing, that there was hail of an inch or better in diameter that came out of the storm over mostly western side of Rangeley. We actually had this webcam image from a shopping mall in Rangeley that showed some of this hail coming down. No reports of damage other than some shredded leaves from the hail. No reports of wind or anything with this storm, but still, I mean, that's a pretty exciting storm considering the types of things we see out here on the western slope. Moving into the climate summary, we have our high temperatures for the spring season. Topping them off with a high of 88 degrees is Canyonlands and Junction Airport. Canyonlands saw this high temperature of 88 on the 24th of May, the 29th, and the 30th. Grand Junction only saw this high on the 29th. Looking at these numbers, you can see that the end of May was the warm period for the spring season. If these temperatures had happened a week later, we probably wouldn't see highs anywhere close to this. It probably would have been more like upper 70s to low 80s, because we did end up with a very cool start to the month of May. And then looking at our low temperatures for the spring, these were all in early March with a few exceptions. We saw our coldest low temperature tied between Aspen and Craig of -6 degrees Fahrenheit, and in Craig this was on both the 4th and the 18th of March, and in Aspen this was on the 28th. You can see that with the exception of Cortez, most of these kind of all happened roughly around those same general dates. Cortez just got lucky with a random cold day in April. Precipitation, a little bit of a mixed bag. We started off the season really strong with much above normal precipitation totals across the board, but we ended up seeing a very dry second half to April and most of May, the month of May, which led to this more evenly distributed above and below normal pattern, where you can kind of see that the northern half of the area is kind of missing out, with Meeker coming in below average, Craig coming in below average, Vernal is below average as well. Canyonlands also came in a bit, about 1/4 of an inch below average, while Grand Junction came in just above average. So like those central sites kind of show where that battleground, shall I say, between the above normal precipitation and below normal precipitation exists, and then areas south of the I-70 corridor or along it really came in with these above normal to much above normal precipitation totals, with Rifle here being our big winner at 2.35 inches above normal and a total for the season of just over 5¼ inches. And Vernal came in at the bottom, about 1 3/4 inches below normal, with a total of just under 7/10. So really scattershot this season with who saw precipitation and who didn't. As far as our drought outlook, current guidance from the drought monitor is showing conditions staying more or less the same. If you've stayed up to date with the monthly outlooks, you know that there are a few pockets of abnormally dry conditions, but those aren't actually considered a drought category. You don't see those until you get into a D1 drought category. So this is basically saying that we're going to kind of stay in that no drought to a little drier than normal conditions across the area. And looking at our summer season climate outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, they are really favoring above normal temperatures, especially around the Four Corners. These are going to see the highest chances of seeing above normal temperatures, but the whole area is pretty well favored to see those above normal temperatures through the season. And then CPC is slightly favoring these below normal precipitation chances, again, around the Four Corners and more or less the southern half of the Grand Junction County warning area, with areas to the north seeing equal chances of above or below normal precipitation. And a lot of this A lot of this is really going to depend on what happens with the monsoon, which is really dependent on how quickly we melt out the snowpack, because it's little monsoon 101 here. It's the temperatures, the temperature differential between like the desert valleys to our south and somewhat west, and the colder mountain areas that kind of helps to create the circulations that bring up that monsoonal moisture. And so with the snowpack still in place on the mountains, we're disrupting the development of that circulation, and so we may see a later onset monsoon, we may see a non-soon, we may see a totally normal monsoon. We're just gonna have to wait and see. But this is the current climate guidance as it stands right now. And that's all for the spring. I will see you again in a couple months for the summer seasonal summary, and enjoy!